The war had been raging for decades, an endless clash between humanity and the Zelthari, a race of towering insectoid beings with shimmering exoskeletons and minds as sharp as their claws. Humanity's last hope rested in Commander Jackson Reed, a man who had seen too many battles to count but never once faltered under pressure. He was known not just for his tactical brilliance but also for his unyielding sense of honor. To him, every loss on the battlefield weighed heavily, even if it meant sacrificing sleep or skipping meals. Jackson wasn't alone in this fight. Beside him stood Lieutenant Ava Calder, his second-in-command and one of the few people he trusted implicitly. Ava was quick-witted, resourceful, and carried herself with a quiet confidence that inspired those around her. Her fiery red hair matched her fiery spirit, though she often tempered it with humor when things got too grim, a trait Jackson secretly appreciated more than he let on. On the other side of the galaxy, leading the Zelthari forces, was Queen Nixera, an enigma wrapped in chitin and silk. She ruled her hive with an iron will softened only by moments of unexpected grace. Unlike most Zelthari, whose actions were driven purely by instinct, Nixera possessed a rare intelligence that bordered on human-like cunning. She communicated through melodic clicks and resonant hums translated into galactic standard by advanced implants embedded in her thorax. Despite being the enemy, there were whispers among humans about how mesmerizing her presence could be, a combination of beauty and danger that made soldiers hesitate before firing at her retinue. As the conflict dragged on, both sides grew weary. The humans were running low on resources, while the Zelthari colonies suffered from dwindling numbers due to constant skirmishes. Yet neither side showed any sign of backing down. Every attempt at peace talks ended in failure, sabotaged either by mistrust or outright betrayal. It seemed impossible that such fundamentally different species could ever find common ground. But beneath all the bloodshed and hatred lay something neither Commander nor Queen wanted to admit: curiosity. For Jackson, it manifested as stolen glances during ceasefires, studying Nixera's movements across holoscreens with a mix of awe and frustration. For Nixera, it came in the form of late-night musings about the strange bipedal creatures who fought so fiercely despite their fragility. Neither knew then what would come next. A proposal no one saw coming, born out of desperation, hope, and perhaps something deeper still simmering beneath the surface of war. It began innocuously enough, a routine reconnaissance mission gone horribly wrong. Jackson's squad had been sent deep into contested territory, tasked with gathering intel on suspected Zelthari supply routes. What they found instead was an ambush waiting patiently behind jagged rocks and twisted trees native to the planet's harsh terrain. Within moments, blaster fire erupted, lighting up the darkened landscape like fireworks gone rogue. Chaos reigned supreme as Jackson barked orders over comms, trying desperately to keep his team alive amidst the cacophony of death. Ava stayed glued to his side, her rifle spitting bolts of energy faster than anyone thought possible. "We need extraction now," she yelled above the din, ducking as another volley narrowly missed them. But Jackson shook his head grimly. Reinforcements wouldn't arrive in time. Not here, not tonight. Their only chance lay ahead, where shadows danced menacingly near what looked suspiciously like a hidden entrance to some underground structure. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, Jackson led the charge toward salvation, or so he hoped. As they breached the threshold, however, reality shifted abruptly. Instead of finding sanctuary, they stumbled directly into the heart of a Zelthari outpost teeming with activity. The air buzzed with alien chatter, and luminescent orbs cast eerie light across walls pulsating gently as though alive. Before anyone could react, guards descended upon them, weapons raised high. Outnumbered and outgunned, surrender seemed inevitable until a commanding voice sliced through the tension. "Halt!" All eyes turned toward the source, a figure descending gracefully from an upper platform draped in flowing fabric that shimmered like liquid starlight. Queen Nixera herself stood before them, mandibles twitching rhythmically as she regarded the intruders with piercing intensity. For several heartbeats, silence hung heavy between predator and prey. Then, surprisingly, Nixera gestured for her warriors to lower their weapons. Turning back to Jackson, she tilted her head slightly, clicking softly before speaking in perfectly accented galactic standard. "You dare trespass within my domain, human?" Despite the situation, Jackson straightened, refusing to show fear. "Desperation makes fools of us all, Your Majesty," he replied evenly. Nixera's multifaceted eyes gleamed with amusement. "Indeed." With a wave of her clawed hand, She ordered her guards away, leaving the two leaders face to face. "Come," she said simply, turning to lead him deeper into her lair. Every step felt surreal, yet somehow familiar, as if destiny itself guided Jackson forward. They passed chambers filled with bustling drones and lounging warriors, each casting curious glances at the strange interloper walking freely among them. Finally, they reached a grand hall adorned with intricate carvings depicting scenes of triumph and loss, stories etched into stone that told of battles fought long before humanity ventured beyond its cradle. Here, Nyxera paused, facing Jackson fully. "Why have you come?" she asked, genuine curiosity lacing her tone. He hesitated briefly before answering truthfully. "To survive." Her laughter echoed melodiously throughout the chamber, surprising him. "And yet you bring destruction wherever you tread." "Not intentionally," Jackson countered, meeting her gaze steadily. "War breeds desperation, yes, but not without reason. We seek nothing more than coexistence." Queen Nyxera studied him closely, reading truths hidden behind carefully chosen words. Perhaps sensing sincerity where others saw only defiance, she nodded slowly. "Then perhaps we shall speak further, when survival is no longer your sole concern." In that moment, surrounded by enemies yet feeling oddly safe, Jackson realized something profound. Maybe peace didn't require treaties signed in sterile rooms. Maybe it started right here, with understanding forged amidst chaos. When Jackson returned to his base, shaken but alive, he couldn't shake the image of Queen Nyxera from his mind. There was something magnetic about her poise, her wisdom, the way she commanded respect without raising a weapon. And though he'd been trained to see her as an adversary, he couldn't deny the flicker of admiration growing within him. It wasn't just her physical presence, alien yet regal, that captivated him. It was the spark of recognition in her multifaceted eyes, as if she understood humanity's struggles better than most humans did. Lieutenant Ava Calder noticed the change immediately. Sitting across from Jackson in the dimly lit briefing room, she leaned forward, arms crossed over the table. "What happened out there, sir?" she asked bluntly. "You look like someone who just got hit by a plasma bolt and lived to tell the tale." Jackson chuckled dryly, rubbing his temples. "Something like that," he admitted. He recounted the ambush, the desperate retreat into the Zelthari outpost, and finally, his encounter with Nyxera. When he finished, Ava stared at him, incredulous. "Wait, you're telling me the queen of our sworn enemies invited you into her lair, gave you tea or whatever they drink, and let you walk away? That sounds less like a war story and more like the setup for some bad romance vid." "It wasn't tea," Jackson muttered defensively, though a corner of his mouth twitched upward. "And it wasn't exactly romantic. But there was something there, Ava. Something I can't explain. She didn't have to spare us. She could have ended it right then and there, but she chose not to." Ava arched an eyebrow, her skepticism evident. "You think she's playing you? Trying to get inside your head?" "I don't know," Jackson confessed. "But I do know this, she's smarter than we give her credit for. Smarter than any of us. She sees this war differently, like it's a puzzle she hasn't solved yet." "And you're part of the puzzle now?" Ava pressed, leaning back in her chair. Her expression softened slightly as she studied him. "Look, I trust your instincts, Commander. If you say there's something worth exploring here, then fine. But don't lose sight of who we're fighting for. The men and women counting on you, they need you focused." Jackson nodded solemnly. "I hear you, Lieutenant. Believe me, I'm not forgetting why we're here." Still, the seed of doubt and possibility had taken root. Could Nyxera truly be interested in ending the war? Or was this some elaborate gambit designed to weaken humanity's resolve? The days that followed were fraught with tension. Back-and-forth skirmishes continued along the front lines, though neither side seemed eager to escalate further. Reports trickled in of unusual activity within Zelthari territories, movements that suggested strategic withdrawal rather than preparation for attack. Speculation ran rampant among the troops. Was Nyxera consolidating her forces? Planning a new offensive? Or had Jackson's unexpected visit planted seeds of doubt even among her own ranks? Meanwhile, Jackson wrestled with his own emotions. Sleep eluded him, his dreams haunted by visions of Nyxera standing tall against a backdrop of stars. He found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about leadership, loyalty, and sacrifice. Was it possible to admire someone while still opposing them? To see beauty in an enemy without betraying one's own cause? One evening, as he paced the command center alone, Ava approached quietly, holding 2 steaming mugs of synthetic coffee. Wordlessly, she handed him one and leaned against the console beside him. "Still thinking about her?" she asked after a moment. Jackson sighed, staring into the mug as if it held answers. How do you stop hating someone when you realize they might not deserve it? Ava sipped her drink thoughtfully. Maybe hate isn't the problem. Maybe it's the stories we tell ourselves, the ones that make them monsters so we don't have to feel guilty about killing them. But what happens when you meet a monster who doesn't fit the script? Jackson glanced at her sharply. Are you saying I should trust her? No, Ava replied firmly. I'm saying trust yourself. You've always done what's right, even when it was hard. Whatever decision you make next, make sure it comes from that same place. Her words lingered long after she left, echoing in the silence of the empty room. Trust himself. It sounded simple, but Jackson knew better. Trusting himself meant confronting feelings he wasn't ready to name, let alone act on. And yet, deep down, he sensed that the path forward wouldn't be paved with conventional choices. Sometimes, breaking the rules was the only way to rewrite the future. The turning point came unexpectedly, during a diplomatic summit neither side particularly wanted but both agreed to attend. Held aboard a neutral space station orbiting a dying star, the meeting was supposed to be little more than a formality, a chance for leaders to posture and preen while their subordinates exchanged thinly veiled threats. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Jackson arrived flanked by Ava and a small contingent of advisors, all clad in formal uniforms that felt stifling compared to their usual battle gear. Across the vast conference hall, Queen Nyxera entered accompanied by her entourage, her glistening exoskeleton catching the light in ways that made her seem almost ethereal. As protocol dictated, representatives from both sides exchanged pleasantries, their voices stiff and rehearsed. Yet beneath the veneer of civility, tensions simmered dangerously close to boiling over. Hours passed in a blur of negotiations that went nowhere. Each proposal met with counter-arguments, each concession dismissed as insufficient. Tempers frayed, accusations flew, and it became increasingly clear that no amount of talking would bridge the chasm between them. By the time the session adjourned for a brief recess, exhaustion hung heavy in the air. Jackson retreated to a private balcony overlooking the swirling red hues of the dying star, seeking solace in its chaotic beauty. He hadn't been there long when soft footsteps alerted him to another presence. Turning, he found Nyxera standing just inside the doorway, her luminous eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his breath catch. You look troubled, Commander, she said, her voice carrying the faintest trace of amusement. I could say the same about you, Your Majesty, Jackson replied, forcing a smile. Though I suppose ruling a hive leaves little room for peace. Nyxera stepped closer, her movements fluid and deliberate. Peace is elusive for all of us, isn't it? Even now, we stand here pretending these talks mean anything when we both know they are merely delaying the inevitable. Jackson frowned. And what is the inevitable? She tilted her head, considering him. More bloodshed. More loss. Or perhaps, she paused, her mandibles twitching slightly, something else entirely. Her words hung in the charged silence between them, heavy with implication. Jackson's pulse quickened as realization dawned. This wasn't just idle conversation. Nyxera was testing him, probing for weaknesses or opportunities. Summoning his courage, he took a step toward her. Why did you let me live that day in your outpost? He asked, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Why spare me when you could have ended everything then and there? Nyxera regarded him for a long moment before answering. Because I saw something in you, Jackson Reed. A spark of defiance, yes, but also hope. Hope that perhaps this war does not define us. That we are more than conquerors and conquered. Her honesty disarmed him, stripping away layers of suspicion and doubt. For the first time, He allowed himself to see her not as an enemy but as someone burdened by the same weight of responsibility and despair. Taking a deep breath, he spoke the words that had been building within him for weeks. "Then marry me." The shock on Nyxora's face was fleeting, replaced almost instantly by a slow, knowing smile. "What took you so long, human?" she murmured, her voice tinged with laughter. "The war is over now. We go marry." For a heartbeat, Jackson thought he'd misheard her. Then reality crashed over him like a tidal wave. The audacity of what he'd just done, and what she'd agreed to, left him reeling. Marriage between species? Between enemies turned allies? It defied logic, tradition, even sanity. Yet somehow, in that moment, it felt utterly right. Before either could say more, alarms blared throughout the station, shattering the fragile calm. Rushing back into the conference hall, they discovered chaos erupting as news spread of an impending attack, a rogue faction within the Zeltharii determined to sabotage any chance of peace. Panic gripped the assembly, and suddenly, the fragile thread holding humanity and the Zeltharii together threatened to snap. Without hesitation, Jackson turned to Nyxora. "If we're going to end this, we need to act together." Her response was immediate and unwavering. "Lead the way, Commander. Let us show them what true unity looks like." Side by side, they strode into the fray, their alliance forged not in treaties or truces but in the unlikeliest of bonds. Together, they faced the storm, ready to prove that sometimes love and hope can transcend even the deepest divides. As the rogue faction launched its assault on the space station, panic rippled through the delegates and security forces alike. Blaster fire erupted in the corridors, sending diplomats scrambling for cover while armed guards struggled to contain the chaos. Amidst the mayhem, Jackson and Nyxora moved with purpose, their unlikely partnership radiating authority that silenced dissenters and rallied allies. Jackson's tactical mind kicked into overdrive as he assessed the situation. "We need to secure the main reactor core," he shouted above the din. "If they overload it, everyone here is dead." Nyxora nodded sharply, her mandibles clicking in agreement. "My warriors will flank them from below. You take your team through the upper levels. We meet at the junction." With a curt nod, Jackson signaled to Ava and his squad, who quickly fell into formation behind him. They sprinted through the labyrinthine halls, dodging stray bolts of energy and returning fire whenever possible. Despite the peril, Jackson couldn't help but glance back occasionally, ensuring Nyxora remained safe. Her towering figure cut an imposing silhouette against the flashing emergency lights, her exoskeleton gleaming like armor as she directed her own forces with precision and poise. At one point, their paths converged briefly near a collapsed section of the corridor. Debris blocked their way forward, forcing them to improvise. Without missing a beat, Nyxora extended her clawed limbs, effortlessly tearing through the wreckage to create a narrow passage. Jackson watched in awe, momentarily struck by the sheer strength and elegance of her movements. "Impressive," he muttered under his breath. Her response was a low chuckle, rich and melodic. "Do not underestimate me, human. I have centuries of experience dismantling obstacles far greater than steel beams." The comment drew a wry grin from Jackson, even as they pressed onward. Their banter provided a strange kind of comfort amidst the carnage, grounding them in shared determination. For every step closer to the reactor core, their bond deepened, not just as leaders united by necessity, but as individuals beginning to trust each other beyond the confines of duty. When they finally reached the junction, the scene was grim. The rogue Zeltharii operatives had already breached the control room, their weapons trained on the engineers attempting to stabilize the reactor. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the hum of overloaded systems filled the air with an ominous warning. Time was running out. Nyxora wasted no time issuing commands to her warriors, who fanned out to flank the enemy positions. Meanwhile, Jackson coordinated with Ava and his team, setting up suppressive fire to pin down the attackers. As the battle intensified, the two commanders found themselves back-to-back, fighting shoulder to shoulder in a display of unity that left onlookers stunned. "Any brilliant ideas?" Jackson called out, barely dodging a plasma bolt aimed at his head. "Several," Nyxora replied coolly, swiping her claws through the air to disarm a charging opponent. "But none involve letting you die today." Their combined efforts began to turn the tide. One by one, The rogue operatives fell, overwhelmed by the coordinated assault. Yet just as victory seemed within reach, a massive explosion rocked the station, throwing everyone off balance. Smoke billowed from the reactor core, and warning sirens screamed louder than ever. Jackson staggered to his feet, coughing as he tried to orient himself. Through the haze, he spotted Nixera kneeling nearby, her expression grim. "The containment field is failing," she said urgently. "If we don't vent the excess energy, the entire station will detonate." Realization hit Jackson like a punch to the gut. Venting the reactor would save countless lives, but it required someone to manually override the safety protocols, exposing themselves to lethal radiation in the process. There was no time to argue or deliberate. Someone had to act, and fast. "I'll do it," Jackson declared, stepping toward the console. "No," Nixera snapped, grabbing his arm with surprising gentleness. "This is my domain. My people caused this mess. Let me finish it." For a moment, they locked eyes, neither willing to yield. Then, with a resigned sigh, Jackson relented. "Fine. But I'm not leaving your side." Her lips curled into what might have been a smile, if such expressions translated across species. "Persistent, aren't you?" she teased, before striding toward the reactor with Jackson close behind. Together, they worked feverishly, their hands moving in tandem as they input commands and rerouted power flows. Sweat dripped from Jackson's brow, mingling with a metallic tang of fear and adrenaline. Beside him, Nixera's chitin glowed faintly, as though absorbing the ambient radiation to shield them both. Whether intentional or instinctual, the gesture spoke volumes about her commitment, not just to stopping the disaster, but to protecting him. Finally, with a deafening roar, the reactor stabilized, its excess energy vented harmlessly into space. Exhausted but victorious, Jackson and Nixera collapsed against the wall, breathing heavily. Around them, cheers erupted from surviving delegates and soldiers, their relief palpable. As the dust settled, Jackson turned to Nixera, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us all. Again." She inclined her head, her expression unreadable. "And you refused to let me face it alone. Again." In that moment, surrounded by the aftermath of destruction and salvation, they shared something unspoken yet undeniable. This wasn't just about ending a war anymore. It was about forging a future, one where differences didn't divide, but united. Where love wasn't bound by biology or borders, but by choice. Just as the immediate crisis aboard the space station subsided, a new threat emerged, one that neither Jackson nor Nixera could have anticipated. As they prepared to address the surviving delegates and solidify their alliance, an encrypted transmission crackled through the station's communication systems. The message was brief but chilling. "Your union will not stand. The Concordant sees you as abominations." Jackson frowned, glancing at Nixera. "The Concordant? I've never heard of them." Nixera's mandibles twitched in agitation, her normally composed demeanor faltering for the first time. "They are a faction among my people," she admitted reluctantly. "Zealots who believe any mingling with outsiders is sacrilege. They claim to uphold the purity of our hive, though their methods are extreme." Before either of them could process the implications, another explosion rocked the station, this one far more devastating than before. Alarms blared anew as structural integrity warnings flashed across every console. Debris rained down from above, forcing everyone to scatter for cover. "We need to evacuate," Ava shouted, grabbing Jackson's arm. But he shook her off, his eyes locked on Nixera. "No, not yet." His voice carried a steely resolve. "If we leave now, it proves their point, that we can't work together. That we're too divided to survive." Nixera nodded grimly. "He's right. This attack isn't just about killing us, it's about destroying what we represent. If we flee, the Concordant wins." With no time to waste, they rallied their respective forces once again. Jackson led his team toward the engineering bay, where critical life support systems were failing under the strain of repeated sabotage. Meanwhile, Nixera directed her warriors to secure key access points, ensuring the attackers couldn't isolate or trap them further. As Jackson navigated the labyrinthine corridors, he found himself reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. Only days ago, he'd been fighting these very same Zelthari soldiers. Now, they fought alongside him, united by a common purpose. It felt surreal, and deeply hopeful. But hope wasn't enough to stop bullets, or plasma bolts. A group of rogue operatives ambushed them near the engineering bay, pinning them down behind a shattered bulkhead. Blaster fire ricocheted off metal walls, and the acrid smell of scorched air filled the corridor. One of Jackson's men went down hard, clutching his leg as blood seeped between his fingers. "Cover me," Jackson ordered, darting out into the open despite Ava's protests. He hurled a concussion grenade into the enemy formation, buying precious seconds for his team to regroup. When the smoke cleared, he spotted movement ahead, a shadow slipping away into the darkness. "There!" he barked, pointing toward the retreating figure. Without hesitation, he gave chase, weaving through narrow passages until he cornered the operative in a maintenance alcove. To his surprise, the attacker wasn't Zelthari, it was human. The man raised his hand slowly, his face pale with fear. "Commander Reed," he stammered. "Please, don't shoot. I didn't want this. I swear." Jackson lowered his weapon slightly but kept it trained on the stranger. "Who sent you? Speak quickly." "It's General Kara's," the man confessed, trembling. "He thinks your alliance with the Queen is treasonous. He says humanity should never bow to aliens, not even to save ourselves." Ava appeared beside Jackson, her expression darkening. "Kara's has always been a hardliner, but this? Betraying our own kind during a ceasefire." Jackson clenched his jaw, anger simmering beneath the surface. General Kara's was a decorated war hero, revered by many within the military hierarchy. If he truly opposed the alliance, rallying support against it would be dangerously easy. For the first time, Jackson questioned whether humanity itself might be the greatest obstacle to peace. Back in the main hall, Nixera faced challenges of her own. Her warriors had successfully contained most of the Concordant insurgents, but whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire among the ranks. Some openly questioned her leadership, accusing her of abandoning Zelthari traditions for the sake of a human male. Others remained loyal, standing steadfast beside her despite the growing dissent. When Jackson returned, recounting what he'd learned from the captured operative, Nixera listened intently. Her claws clicked softly against the floor as she processed the information. "This is worse than I feared," she said finally. "The Concordant may use this betrayal to rally others to their cause. My authority alone won't hold them back indefinitely." For the first time since proposing to her, Jackson saw vulnerability in Nixera's eyes. It struck him then, she wasn't just risking her life for peace, she was gambling everything, including her throne. And if she fell, so too would their fragile alliance. "We need to act decisively," Jackson said firmly. "Show both sides that unity is stronger than division. That means confronting Kara's publicly, and proving the Concordant wrong." Nixera regarded him thoughtfully. "You understand the risks? Once we step onto that stage, there's no turning back." "I do," Jackson replied without hesitation. "And I'm ready." Together, they addressed the assembled delegates, laying bare the truth about Karas's treachery and the Concordant's sabotage. Gasps rippled through the crowd as evidence mounted, intercepted transmissions, recovered weapons, and testimony from defectors within the rogue factions. By the end of their presentation, outrage simmered in the air, but so did determination. General Karas, however, refused to go quietly. Appearing via hologram, his stern visage loomed over the assembly. "You call yourselves leaders," he spat, his voice dripping with disdain. "Selling out humanity for some alien queen? This isn't diplomacy, it's betrayal." His words sparked murmurs of doubt among the humans present, threatening to unravel the fragile consensus. Before tensions could boil over, Ava stepped forward, her fiery hair catching the light as she faced the hologram defiantly. "Betrayal?" she shot back, her tone sharp enough to cut steel. "Tell me, General, when did humanity decide survival was optional? When did hatred become more important than hope? Commander Reed isn't betraying anyone, he's giving us a future worth fighting for." Her impassioned speech silenced the skeptics, leaving Karas visibly shaken. But the general wasn't finished. With a cold smile, he delivered one final blow. Very well. Let history judge you all. But know this, the Concordant has allies beyond this station. Allies who will ensure your peace doesn't last. The transmission cut off abruptly, plunging the room into uneasy silence. Though the immediate danger had passed, the weight of Karaz's warning hung heavy in the air. Their enemies weren't confined to the station. They were everywhere, lurking in shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That night, as the survivors worked tirelessly to repair the damaged station, Jackson and Nixera retreated to a quiet observation deck overlooking the dying star. Its crimson glow bathed the room in soft light, casting long shadows across the floor. Exhaustion clung to them like a second skin, but neither spoke of rest. You realize this changes nothing, Nixera said after a long pause. Even if we win today, tomorrow brings new battles. New sacrifices. Jackson nodded, leaning against the railing beside her. I know. But maybe that's the point. Peace isn't something you achieve once and forget about. It's something you fight for every single day. She turned to look at him, her multifaceted eyes shimmering with unshed emotion. And you're willing to keep fighting, for me? For us, he corrected gently. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Her laughter echoed softly, tinged with both amusement and disbelief. What took you so long, human? This time, Jackson grinned. Better late than never, Your Majesty. Unbeknownst to them, hidden cameras recorded their conversation, transmitting the footage to unknown recipients. Somewhere deep in the void of space, unseen forces watched and plotted. For while love and unity held the potential to heal old wounds, they also ignited fears in those unwilling to let go of the past. The true battle for peace was only beginning. The days following the space station crisis were a blur of activity and tension. Jackson and Nixera worked tirelessly to solidify their fragile alliance, addressing both human and Zelthari concerns with equal urgency. They held joint broadcasts across galaxies, appealing for unity and understanding while exposing the machinations of General Karaz and the Concordant. Their message resonated with many, but resistance remained, a stubborn undercurrent threatening to undermine everything they had built. General Karaz, now operating in the shadows, became a ghostly figure orchestrating chaos from afar. His influence reached deep into military ranks and civilian populations alike, fueling distrust and fear. Rumors spread like wildfire, whispers of secret weapons being developed, plans to assassinate key leaders, even talk of an impending coup within humanity's command structure. Each new report tested Jackson's resolve and strained his relationship with Ava, who struggled to balance loyalty to her commander with growing doubts about whether peace was truly possible. Meanwhile, Nixera faced dissent among her own people. The Concordant had gained ground, rallying traditionalists and radicals under a banner of xenophobic fervor. Assassination attempts on her life grew more frequent, forcing her to rely heavily on her most trusted warriors, and on Jackson himself. Together, they fortified defenses around her hive worlds, ensuring that any attack would be met with swift retaliation. But the strain showed. Dark circles formed beneath her multifaceted eyes, and her once melodic voice carried traces of weariness. Despite these challenges, moments of quiet solidarity kept them grounded. Late at night, when the weight of leadership felt unbearable, Jackson and Nixera found solace in each other's company. Whether it was sharing stories of their respective childhoods or simply sitting side by side in silence, watching stars drift past the viewport, their bond deepened. These fleeting respites reminded them why they fought, not just for survival, but for something greater than themselves. One evening, as they prepared to deliver yet another address to galactic leaders, Ava approached Jackson with urgent news. "Sir," she said, her tone grave, "we've intercepted communications suggesting the Concordant is planning something big. A coordinated strike against multiple targets, including your homeworld." Jackson's blood ran cold. "Are you sure?" Ava nodded grimly. "It's all here." She handed him a datapad filled with encrypted messages detailing troop movements, supply routes, and projected timelines. At the center of it all was one name, Karaz. Nixera joined them moments later, having overheard the conversation. Her expression hardened as she reviewed the intel. "This isn't just an attack, it's a declaration of war. If we don't stop them now, there will be no coming back." Jackson clenched his fists, determination blazing in his eyes. Then we end this before it begins. Their plan was audacious, bordering on reckless. Using decoys and misinformation, they lured the Concordant forces into a trap near a remote asteroid field. While Karas and his followers believed they were ambushing a convoy carrying vital resources, they instead walked straight into a combined human Zelthari task force led by Jackson and Nixera. The battle that ensued was fierce and unrelenting. Plasma bolts lit up the void of space, turning the darkness into a kaleidoscope of deadly light. Ships clashed in fiery explosions, sending debris spiraling outward like cosmic shrapnel. Amidst the chaos, Jackson piloted a sleek fighter craft alongside Nixera's royal cruiser, coordinating attacks with precision timing. At one critical juncture, Karas's flagship emerged from hyperspace, its massive hull bristling with cannons. It unleashed a barrage so powerful that several Allied vessels disintegrated instantly. Panic rippled through the fleet, but Jackson refused to yield. With Nixera covering his flank, he executed a daring maneuver, weaving between enemy fire to plant a virus-laden missile directly into the flagship's core systems. As the virus took hold, crippling the ship's engines and defenses, Jackson transmitted a final message to Karas. "You wanted war, General. Now see what it costs." On board the flagship, Karas watched helplessly as his dream of supremacy crumbled around him. Cornered and outnumbered, he made a desperate attempt to escape via shuttle, but not before broadcasting one last defiant speech. "Mark my words," he snarled, his face contorted with rage. "History will remember me as the man who tried to save humanity from ruin." His shuttle exploded seconds later, destroyed by a stray blast from the ongoing skirmish. Though some celebrated his demise, Jackson felt only sorrow. Hatred, he realized, was a cycle, one that could only be broken through compassion and forgiveness. With Karas gone and the Concordant routed, the tide turned decisively in favor of the alliance. Surviving rogue factions surrendered en masse, pledging allegiance to Nixera and agreeing to abide by the terms of peace. Cheers erupted across communication channels as news of victory spread, uniting disparate species in celebration. In the aftermath, Jackson and Nixera stood together aboard her flagship, gazing out at the stars. For the first time in years, the galaxy felt hopeful, alive with possibility rather than dread. "So," Jackson began, breaking the comfortable silence between them, "does this mean we're finally getting married?" Nixera chuckled softly, her mandibles clicking in amusement. "I suppose it does. Though I imagine your people will have questions." He grinned, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Let them ask. We'll answer, together." Their wedding ceremony, held months later on a neutral planet bathed in perpetual twilight, became a symbol of unity for countless worlds. Humans and Zelthari mingled freely, exchanging stories, laughter, and promises of cooperation. Leaders from both sides signed treaties formalizing their alliance, vowing to work toward mutual prosperity. Years passed, and the legacy of Jackson and Nixera endured. Under their guidance, humanity and the Zelthari forged a future brighter than anyone could have imagined. Conflicts still arose, as they always would, but the lessons of empathy and collaboration guided resolutions rather than vengeance. And so, in a universe often defined by division, two unlikely souls proved that love and courage could transcend even the deepest divides. As long as stars burned in the night sky, their story would remind others that peace was not merely an ideal, but a choice worth fighting for.